morning, everybody. Welcome to the Energy Realities podcast. The Gang of Four is all here today, and we're ready to go talking about the sense of wind and solar. Boy, this is going to be a lot of fun, isn't it? Tammy Nemeth is in Canada today? No,
UK today.
UK today.
Yeah.
Back in the UK. How are things in Keir Starmer's domain?
Don't ask me that question. If I answer, I might get flagged by the new social media police. So
My goodness. Yeah.
I'll just say, the weather's. I'll stick to weather since it's not climate. But it's a nice day. It's not too hot, not too cold, just the way I like it.
As it tends to be in the UK in the month of
Yeah.
July, right? Yeah. So it's always, I mean, goodness gracious, compared to what Irina Slav is going through in Bulgaria right now, the
Poor Irina.
deadly heat wave that has struck her country yet again in the heat of summer. How are you doing? Are you surviving?
I am surviving, yeah. I'm holding on. The problem is that there are wildfires here and there, and there are not enough people and machinery to put them out. But you know what? Some of these fires are being set on purpose. Isn't that shocking?
Yeah.
No, I mean, sounds like you're living in California.
Yeah. That.
Or Canada, for that matter.
Or Canada.
We'll survive. Amazingly, we will survive.
Well, good. I'm glad to know it because we want you back next week. Okay. Stuart Turley, our dear leader, is in his bunker, his fabulous palatial bunker in Oklahoma today. How you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I am sore. My backhoe got a good workout and also got my cement mixer out there. So absolutely had a blast.
Stu spent the weekend building a culvert that will flood his neighbor the next time it rains. So that's he's a very vindictive guy in the neighborhood here. Just kidding. That was a joke. So here we are today talking about the economic sense of wind and solar. And we in the United States woke up to a diatribe from our president, Donald J. Trump, about
that was
wind.
So funny.
The huge scam that is the wind industry. And so, it put a big note of joy in my heart to hear all that because it's things I've been writing about for about 10 years now. But it was just really fun. What did you think, Tammy, about the frozen face of Ursula von der Leyen while Trump was going through all that?
On one hand, I felt kind of sorry for her because the previous bit, there was this, yay, we signed this agreement. Finally, the whole tariff uncertainty's done. And then he just starts going. And when it pans to her face afterwards, she's just got this like sick, stony look. And, but the thing with everything that he said, he wasn't wrong. Yeah. And as you said, this is something we've been talking about for a long time because he said, and he was so right, that wind doesn't exist except for subsidies. If you didn't have the subsidies, it wouldn't be there. And then I loved how he mentioned Germany, and Ursula von der Leyen was part of Angela Merkel's government when they embarked upon the Energiewende. And so or the energy transition in Germany. So, for her to have to sit there and take it, I mean, that must have been very difficult for her. And of course, the Europeans today are all angry about it and everything when you look at some of the European press. But, the thing is, now it's in a situation, at another conference, he was talking about how China's doing everything, but they're really doubling down on coal. They're doubling down on natural gas. But his big focus was, if we're going to do AI, and everybody's talking about how AI is going to fix all these things and do all this stuff, it's going to need like twice as much, maybe 3 times as much energy as the current grid has. And it's like, okay, well, how do you get that? China's already been planning ahead because they've got the coal, they've got the reliable power, they have the reliable grid. And I think this is, if you're looking at it from a geopolitical perspective and great power competition, China's well ahead. And, Trump has been talking about in other contexts how they're changing the regulations, how they're going to make it a little bit easier to get approvals that can't be just, litigated to death or whatever, in order to slow walk until, investors just pull out. So, there's some potential there for America to catch up. I don't know if Europe can catch up. Maybe Germany's kind of thinking about it now that they're exploring natural gas exploration with Holland offshore, which is crazy, given what they've been talking about a couple of years ago, even 6 months ago. So what's interesting is that when we talk about the economic sense of it, Trump highlighted there is no economic sense. It's all, politically motivated or whatever. But then, if you look at some really great writers, I talked to David Turver last week on my podcast, where he talked about the hidden costs of renewables. And it's insane. It's absolutely, he's looking at it from the UK perspective. And then if you look at what the UK is announcing, and Irina had a great piece on the Bank of England today, and they're just like oblivious to this whole idea that they like, fingers in the ears going la la la, because he's like, no, Trump, we're not going to listen to you. Wind is the best thing ever. Solar's great. Batteries are going to take it. We're going to have interconnectors. What the other countries are going to produce on those interconnections, who cares? We're just going to double down on all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I hope it was a bit of a wake-up call. Unfortunately, I think a lot of European leaders, whenever Trump talks, it's kind of like in America, they just do the opposite. So it'll be interesting to see what happens going forward.
Irina, Warren Buffett, who's worth about $200 billion at last count, famously once said that there's absolutely no reason to build a wind farm unless it's to take advantage of the subsidies. That's the only reason why any of them ever get built. Was he wrong?
Of course not. He's a smart man and he's an honest man. Nobody paid much attention when he said that, but he was absolutely right. And now we're seeing this. But first, I would like to ask Tammy, please don't waste your sympathy on Ursula von der Leyen. Please.
I had a little bit.
No, the closest I've come is nearly, feeling sorry for her. But I'm sorry, was she visiting the King of Europe? No, but she acted in exactly this way. She could have said something, but she didn't. And then she goes and closes this deal that includes a commitment for buying how many hundreds of billions of
$750 billion in total.
$750 billion worth of oil, gas, coal.
From the United States.
From the United States.
Which is physically impossible.
Yeah.
And she literally betrayed the whole European Union, which is not the first time. It won't be the last time. So they're committing to buying all this hydrocarbon energy while building more wind and solar, which, by the way, they're falling behind with, their targets.
Yeah.
And Germany specifically, and not just Germany. I wonder why. Probably because it doesn't make economic sense. And David, as you say, you've been writing about this for a decade now. But there was so much noise and so much propaganda that nobody listened. But now we're seeing the inevitable results of this push to build as much wind and solar as possible. And we're seeing that it does not make sense. And Trump has nothing to do with it yet. Trump stopped offshore wind in the US, but in Europe there has been no government-led attack on wind and solar. Governments still support wind and solar, and yet they're falling behind on their targets because it's impossible to hit these targets, and because the money for subsidies on which these two technologies rely, and I'm sorry I'm saying this, we've been saying this for thousands of times on this podcast, money is not infinite.
Yeah.
And this is beginning to, to become so obvious that they can't hide it anymore. So
I think that
now I will be blaming climate change for all this.
But Irene, I'm so glad you pointed out that the repetition, because unfortunately that's required these days. You have to keep repeating the point until maybe it sinks in, even if it's not the policymakers. It could be just the average person who's like, hey, wait a second. This
Right.
isn't, my bill's going up. Don't tell me it's going down when it's going up. Stop gaslighting me. And I'm so grateful that we have this podcast where we can talk about these things and repeat, you know, because I think a lot of people just throw an idea out there. It's really obvious. Okay, I've done my thing. Here's the point. But unfortunately, we do need to keep repeating. And I'm so grateful for everybody's voice on this podcast for articulating it so well. So thank you.
It's
Me
idiotic
too.
from time to time. It's like saying that the sun rises from the east, it sets in the west, as if this could be debatable. But apparently facts are debatable now, and people willfully ignore them. They purposely ignore them just to push their vision of reality, which does not reflect actual reality.
Yeah. And a big part of the reality is the national debt of all these countries that are, running up their debt immensely with all these subsidies. And Stu, Tammy mentioned your favorite topic, the Bank of England. And
Great.
when does this all come crashing down? I mean, when does reality come crashing down? It's crashing down now in the Trump administration in the United States. But when does this reality come crashing down, in the UK and the EU?
I think sooner than you think. Let me go ahead and play that clip that you guys were laughing about. And I absolutely just thought this was the absolute ultimate trolling of President
the Trump clip. Yeah.
So here we go.
We will not allow a windmill to be built in the United States. They're killing us. They're killing the beauty of our scenery, our valleys, our beautiful plains. And I'm not talking about airplanes. I'm talking about beautiful plains, beautiful areas in the United States. And you look up and you see windmills all over the place. It's a horrible thing. It's the most expensive form of energy. It's no good. They're made in China, almost all of them. When they start to rust and rot in 8 years, you can't really turn them off. You can't bury them. They won't let you bury the propellers, the props, because there's a certain type of fiber that doesn't go well with the land. That's what they say. The environmentalists say you can't bury them because the fiber doesn't go well with the land. In other words, if you bury it, it will harm our soil. The whole thing is a con job. It's very expensive. And in all fairness, Germany tried it, and wind doesn't work. You need subsidy for wind, and energy should not need subsidy. With energy, you make money. You don't lose money. But more important than that is it ruins the landscape. It kills the birds. They're noisy. You have a certain place in the Massachusetts area that over the last 20 years had 1 or 2 whales wash ashore, and over the last short period of time, they had 18. Okay?
Yeah, that's just
it's driving them loco.
Right?
It's driving them crazy. Now, windmills will not come. It's not going to happen in the United States. And it's very expensive. And I would love to see. I mean, today I'm playing the best course, I think, in the world, Turnberry. Even though I own it, it's probably the best course in the world, right? And I look over the horizon and I see 9 windmills. It's like great. At the end of the 18th, I said, isn't that a shame? What a shame. You have the same thing all over Europe in particular. You have windmills all over the place. Some of the countries prohibit it, but people ought to know that these windmills are very destructive. They're environmentally unsound, just the exact opposite. Because the environmentalists, they're not really environmentalists. They're political hacks. They're these are people that they almost want to harm the country. But you look at these beautiful land.
One thing I want to point out, I've been talking for a long time, and this is very critical. President Trump is the first political leader to say 8 years. Wind farms only last 8 years. That number is critical because I've been saying it for almost 3 years that all the numbers that I can get from the maintenance, because they keep them close to their vest. I've had to have whistleblowers give me the reports, and it is 3 years that they start rolling nameplate upgrades on these things. So they get the subsidy money to get a nameplate upgrade. That gives them a little more time, and that now fudges the numbers in the wind farms. But I've been saying 8 years is the magic number that it is. And all of a sudden, when Tammy, you forwarded that note, I was like, oh, he said 8 years. It made my day. Somebody else has got the same number set that I have. I'm like, holy smokes, that's critical.
Yeah, it really is critical. And it just busts the myth that these things, have a 25-year life. That's what the wind industry claims, that their turbines and their blades and their towers have a 25-year life. Well, that's obviously false. And now that the subsidies are going away, the economics of these projects, they're going to have to figure out, somehow devise a business plan that's sustainable without them.
You just nailed it, David. And that is, as these subsidies go away, every 3 years, they put in a new nameplate or they consider it an upgrade in order to get those things fixed. Now that money is going away, you're going to see more wind farms just abandoned. And as those wind farms are abandoned, there are 79,000 windmills in the United States. There is zero land reclamation. It is about $89 billion liability for this in the United States alone. This is a horrible project. But David, you bring me back to the question. Is Trump stalling on this? I want to give, again, Felicity Broadstack from oilprice.com, a great authoress. I think she is a very good one, but she has this point from a UK perspective. Is Trump stalling? No, because Doug Burgum pointed out over the last week a few critical points, and that is, there are huge kill switches in the Chinese wind and solar equipment. And I noticed that somebody just put out, they could take out Europe with only controlling 3 gigawatts because of what we saw on the Iberia plain. So when you sit back and take a look at this, this is absolutely critical as we go through. I also want to point out, let's not forget the Chinese spy balloons that I wrote about almost 2 years ago.
3 years ago.
As China has a kill switch, but could China hack our electric grid? And in 4 words, yes. How soon is Mayorkas in on it? That has been out there for a long time. This is absolutely nuts. How far all this has gone.
So it's not just wind. We've focused a lot on wind. It's also solar has a big problem. I've got a report here from FDI Consulting, a great consulting group that does economic reports like this. They're talking about the implications of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on wind and solar, and they find that we conservatively estimate that more than 320 proposed wind and solar projects with a total capacity of over 100 gigawatts would no longer be economically viable under the language in the One Big Beautiful Bill Act that is going to phase out those subsidies over the next 5 years. And, this is, it's just due to the subsidy going away. And I think that's a serious understatement. And I talked to some folks at FTI the other day, and they, I think, agree that this is probably an understatement, because there's no way to really factor in the magnitude of what is going to become a real epidemic of capital flight out of those industries by private equity institutional investors as they see the economics of these projects begin to collapse due to the phasing out of the subsidies and the inability to access the investment tax credits. I just think it's just going to become this kind of a tsunami tsunami that's going to hit both of those industries in the United States. But there, of course, U.S. is one country. Yes, it's a big economy and a big piece of the pie, but there's nothing similar at play in the UK or the EU or Canada or anywhere else in the Western world, right?
Well,
But
I don't know.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go, Irina.
I was going to say that these industries busted their own myth because they've been telling us that wind and solar is economical and makes market sense even without the subsidies. So why did you start crying about losing the subsidies then?
Right.
When the one big beautiful bill was passed, why were you warning that this is going to break the grid because you wouldn't be able to build more solar installations? Why wouldn't you? You said they're economical even
Right.
without subsidies. So why are you worried about the loss of subsidies?
Because it's going to lose the capital. They won't have the capital to pay for everything, right?
Because they don't make sense.
Yes, they don't make sense. As Warren Buffett said. Yes, Tammy, go ahead.
I would say that the companies that operate currently in the UK and the EU, the EU and the UK aren't really changing anything. Like the David Miliband or Ed Miliband, sorry, had the new offers where they do this contracts for difference in the UK and what they're going to pay as a sort of fixed price for wind, solar, and different kinds of wind. And the solar price has actually declined a little bit, but they're still getting a fixed price, a subsidy. And then there's a natural gas subsidy or tax that's put on everybody's bill that they have to pay. They call it a green gas levy that people have to pay. So, when we look at what's the economics, what are the costs of wind and solar, and we often put them together because it's part of the overall grid, and then there's these different elements that combine in the pricing for consumers, because ultimately it's the consumers who pay, whether they're the taxpayers, where the governments are throwing around all this money like they can just print it off or pull it off a tree or whatever. Ultimately, it's the taxpayers who pay. And then they're also paying when it comes to their bill. And when you look at, say, the UK, which has the highest industrial pricing in the world, which is crazy, and what is that going to do for deindustrialization? So I think that the EU and the UK are going to continue down the subsidy path as far as they can take it, because they lose face if they say, you know what, I think we're wrong. I think we've been wrong. This whole Green Deal thing that we've been pushing for the past 5 years, maybe we got it wrong. They can't do it. They
Right,
cannot
politically,
admit
it's
they've been
impossible.
wrong.
Yeah.
So Trump's like, yeah, this is dumb. We're not going to do it. This is, expensive and everything. But the European leaders, they can't do it. They can't. And so what does that mean? It means that they're going to continue down the subsidy path until everybody's broke, until the IMF comes along and says, well, you got to make some choices. And this was an article actually last week in the UK where they're like, oh, well, they're going to have to start making significant choices now. Maybe they have to change how they do their National Health Service. Maybe they're going to have to do this other stuff if they want to make sure they've got enough money in the bank, because the IMF's probably going to have to bail out the UK or whatever. And the EU, where are they going to get all this money from? They say they're going to do all this defense spending, which I thought was hilarious in this trade deal yesterday, because Canada's like, oh, no, we're not going to deal with America anymore. We're going to buy our defense stuff from the EU. The EU yesterday says, we're going to buy from America.
Yeah, we're going to buy it from the U.S. So
yeah. So is it Canada going to participate in an EU program to buy American stuff? I don't know. It seems kind of stupid.
Wow,
hey,
I did not have that on my bingo card.
yeah.
And
know,
that is why the EU wants to go to war. Because if they don't distract people from the actual problems, people will see them for who they are, and they must not.
Great point.
Thank you
That's
for
actually a
summing
really
it up
great
so
point.
well.
Hey, David, can I, if you don't mind, I'd like to play this one video that I did say. It's about a 30-second video from Doug
Cool.
Burgum. Let me pull that up. Give me a second. It is critical to realize that as the EU goes through this movement, that as net zero policies equals deindustrialization, and there's a alignment more with China and the EU and the UK, this is going to be a really big problem for them. And I think Doug Burgum really hit it right when he said this. So hang on, bear with me. I'm moving a little slow.
Come on now, we can't have dead air. It's like being on
That's
radio.
okay.
You have
John
dead air.
Chavner had a really great comment there where he was talking about the full
subsidies
carbon
for
footprint of
intermittent, unreliable, and expensive sources, wind and solar. The other part about that, Maria, and you've been so good on this for so long, but you know, most of those components, like for solar, all coming from China. I mean, information coming out a few weeks ago that some of these Chinese solar panels had kill switches inside of them. So this is just like the Huawei thing a few years ago. It's like we have to have secure supply chains, but for right now, President Trump understands we need reliable, affordable American energy, baseload energy. You know,
yeah.
Sorry,
Baseload.
Tammy.
Oh, yes, go ahead, Tammy. Oh,
No. He's absolutely right. We need that base load. I just wanted to do a shout out here to the comment from John Chavner where he talks about the full carbon footprint of the manufacturing and disposal of both solar and wind. And Trump said it there where now the environmentalists are saying don't bury the turbine blades because of the carbon fibers and what's that doing to groundwater maybe or whatever. And so that's a real issue, which is why in California, for example, the wind turbines just stay there. They don't actually take them down because it's like, what are you going to do with them?
right.
And the same thing with this disposal of solar and the amount of energy required if they actually decide to rip it apart and melt it down or whatever is insane. And what are you going to use solar power to rip apart the solar panels? Yeah, whatever. But Doug Burgum's comments there about the kill switches. Well, there's the national security risk. If you're not using components and parts that you're making yourself and you're reliant upon a foreign power, especially when it comes to the technology sphere where you put chips in and stuff, who knows what is actually in there. And that's a legitimate concern. And I don't think the EU and UK are really going to do anything about it.
Wow. I see a closer relationship with the EU and China and the UK and China in the trading blocks that are forming around the world. And one fear that I see out of the EU and the President Trump's agreement yesterday is that the oil prices are going up today because they think that there's going to be a lot more traffic and stuff, but B, the net zero energy policies and the carbon taxes and all the fees that are facing the U.S. Oil and gas producers, I see as a real problem looming on the horizon for this administration. If they don't get it fixed now, it's going to be a problem.
Yeah, I want to see the details of this trade agreement because, Trump's talking about companies are going to be able to export into the EU. There's all of these emissions accounting rules and regulations in the EU. So, yeah, that's great. You have these tariffs that whatever, you have zero tariffs or whatever, but that's a non-tariff barrier when they're saying that in order to sell your product, you have to comply with all this stuff. And then there's the labeling regulations if you're selling anything that's like food or whatever. So, I don't know how that's going to work in practice. Yay, sounds good on maybe in his announcement, but the devil's always in the details.
There is language in the deal apparently that addresses the secondary trade barriers, but I haven't seen what that language says. So
yeah.
And until I see it, I'm concerned.
I will say I know that the administration has been extremely concerned about the whole carbon accounting crap at the EU and how the impact it would have on American companies selling into that market or doing business in the EU in any way. And so I'll be interested to see what the actual language says.
Yeah.
Well, may I ask Tammy, the California debacle that we have going on with Governor Newsom is truly a
human debacle.
A
Gavin
human
Newsom.
debacle. And it's also a national security issue. And as it appears to be the back door to the EU and Canada and the UK's energy policies, this new methodology of Governor Newsom trying to impose his will on the US kind of seems like he's aligning himself with the EU, the UK, and Canada. And I think that they're going to try to squash that. But boy, that's a real problem.
You're right, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because when Trump was talking at the AI summit last week, he said that one of the biggest obstacles is when you have different states coming up with these rules that impact every other state. And he said it ends up being a race to the bottom of whichever state has put up the most roadblocks ends up dictating what the rest of the nation has to do. And he was talking in particular about the automobile emission rules that are, the California emission standard or whatever, that ended up being what everybody had to use. And I guess the EPA is now saying, no, we're not going to use that standard anymore. And I don't really know how automobile manufacturers, they would have to have 2 production lines. I don't know how that works. So yes, I think that it'll be challenged in court, but what happens in the meantime? If they implement this thing and it goes to court, does that mean companies still have to comply until an outcome has been reached, which can take years, as we know in the American system? Or are they allowed to just operate normally without complying with all these emissions accounting rules and stuff? I don't know, but California has been in alignment with the EU and the UK and what Canada's doing. They have an emission trading system with Quebec for a long time. So I don't know how that gets undone in 6 months or 4 years. It's been building for some time now.
Yeah, it's hard to see.
Yeah, but good point.
All right. I'm exhausted on this topic. I have no questions left. Maybe we should go to, does anyone have anything else to add before we move to articles? Okay. We've beaten that horse. All right. Stu, okay. Tammy's first.
Okay. So this is actually a great segue to what Stu was saying about China. This past week, the EU and China had a meeting about climate, and they issued a joint statement about how they're going to cooperate on everything climate, how they're going to uphold the central role of the Paris Agreement and the IPCC, how they're all going to support Brazil, how they're going to work towards all economic sectors reducing their greenhouse gases in alignment with the long-term temperature goal of the Paris Agreement and so on. And I think this was the biggest point, and it was put at the bottom, and I'm just going to read it out here. The joint statement says they're going to be enhancing bilateral cooperation in such areas as energy transition, adaptation, methane emissions management and control, carbon markets, and green and low carbon technologies to drive their respective green and low carbon transition processes together. So I know that the big thing that they're talking about coming up at COP30 in Brazil is this whole carbon market thing, and how they want to set up this voluntary carbon market where companies can trade their emissions numbers and what they're saving and invest in these other different things in order to bring their emission score down. And there was a whole bunch of banks and deals made this past week, actually, that are establishing these carbon markets. And I'm not going to say which banks because I can't remember precisely. I don't want to get it wrong. But if you go to ESG Today, which is this aggregate news source for all these different sort of things, they listed all the different deals that were made. And then this links to the second article there. And this is a great Substack. Jessica Weinkel, who her Substack is called Conflicted, and she wrote this really great piece about the International Court of Justice and their advisory opinion on climate change. Now, the environmentalists in Canada were celebrating. There was like 5 articles last week about how amazing this is. haha, Carney, you're not going to be able to get any projects done because this sets the precedent that you can't build any more fossil fuel infrastructure, no more fossil fuel projects, and other countries can sue you for the emissions that you've had in the past. So I highly recommend taking a look at this Substack just for an analysis about where the heck did they come up with this 1.5 degrees Celsius target when the Paris Agreement supposedly was 2 degrees. And then they decided, well, we're going to be under 2. And then suddenly 1.5 becomes the number. So she goes into this great thing. They talked about some opinions of different justices. There was, of course, a justice from China who said that, you can't stop developing countries from using fossil fuels because it would be inhumane. But so other countries have to pay to help them reduce their emissions or something. So yeah, really interesting development. I would love to hear Trump's take on what this ruling is, but I know in the United States, they will just say, yeah, it doesn't apply to us, since I think they pulled out of the ICJ. But Canada, unfortunately, follows all this stuff, and our justices are not national, and they would rather absorb an international ruling than have national policy in Canada.
Well, I guess my question about that whole deal is if the target temperature is so easily malleable, you can just willy-nilly change it here and there, depending on, what's convenient at the time, then do we really have a climate emergency we're trying to cure?
No.
I mean, doesn't that effectively negate any claim that there's an emergency going on? It seems to me it does.
Well, the thing with the emergency declaration is that when is it ever over?
Right.
So they make an emergency
know?
Declaration. We're in a climate emergency. Oh, okay. Well, when's it over? What points do you have to reach in order to say it's over? And they're like, well, you have to stop warming by 1.5 degrees. It's like, okay, well, what would happen at the end of an ice age and things are warming up? I don't think the ice age people were like, no, stop burning, stop having a fire because everything's warming up.
Yeah. You're obligated to freeze to death in order to stop global warming. Yeah. Anyway,
that's my stuff. You can find me on Substack at thenemethReport.substack.com. And that's my
Great.
stuff. Thank you.
Great information, Tammy.
Oh, it's me. Okay. So the first one on the left there is Zeldin and Trump prepare an assault on EPA's endangerment finding. This is really the biggest policy initiative related to energy and climate that we'll see in the Trump administration, because the endangerment finding that has enabled EPA to regulate carbon dioxide, plant food, the fundamental building block for all life on planet Earth, as a, quote, pollutant, unquote, has been the foundation for every climate-related regulation, heavy regulation, in both the Obama and Biden administrations now for, 16 years since that endangerment finding was made by the EPA. And it was based on a 2007 court decision in the case called Massachusetts v. EPA, a decision, 5-4 decision reached by the Supreme Court, in which it gave the EPA the right to study whether or not to regulate carbon dioxide and other, quote, greenhouse gases as pollutants. Those other greenhouse gases include methane and, wait for it, water vapor. So technically the EPA could be regulating water vapor as a pollutant if it had gotten that far yet. So here's the thing about that court decision. When it was issued, the Chevron deference was in effect, okay, which was the legal doctrine that required the courts to defer to the judgment of these self-inflating bureaucrats and all the bureaucracies of the federal government in their interpretation of laws like the Clean Air Act. And so that deference was repealed last year in the Loper-Bright v. Raimondo decision by the Supreme Court. It no longer exists. The courts are no longer required to defer to the judgment of these regulatory bureaucracies. And so that sets the stage for the rescission of this idiotic doctrine that will, after that's done, result in the complete repeal of the entire Obama-Biden climate agenda. So this is the kicker right here. This is the key point. You know, they're going to go after it, and it will be litigated for several years in the courts, but ultimately you're going to get to a 6-3 Supreme Court with no Chevron deference, and the Supreme Court's going to say, sorry, folks, this was never legitimate to begin with. And so this is the big deal. You know, the media is hysterically quoting, you know, the NRDC and the climate guardians and all these left-wingers who just really want communism. And but the reality is this is most likely going to happen. And the left-wingers are going to have to figure out a different way to force the United States to adopt a communist government at the end of the day. The second one is just an update on just how awful a Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg really was. We will all remember that he famously was given a $7.5 billion pot of money in the IRA. No, it was in the infrastructure bill of 2021. $7.5 billion for the Transportation Department to build strategically located supposedly 8,000 charging stations across the United States by the end of the first Biden term. That didn't become a second term, blessedly. He got 400 built. Most of them are not working, and vast majority have been located in parts of cities where no one owns an EV to begin with, under the whole DEI climate justice mindset that dominates the Democratic Party. So, I mean, he built 400 stations. You know, Tesla can roll that many out and install them at Buc-ee's stations around the country in a week. It took him 3.5 years to do 400. So that's how bad Pete Buttigieg really was. And I guess that'll be the end of that particular story, because the current transportation secretary has clawed back whatever's left of that $7.5 billion. So none of that crap is going to continue now.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's insane how much money was spent
It's
on.
just unbelievable.
And they just wasted a lot of money.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to know where that money went. You can't tell me it cost that much to build them.
No, it doesn't. A lot of it went to, it was like the USAID budget, okay, where we saw all of these billions of dollars going to these NGOs that have just been created for the specific purpose of grifting off the government budget. And a lot of it went there. And then, you know, a lot of it went to the climate justice NGOs. And, you know, at the end of the day, what really needs to happen in the United States is to make NGOs illegal. We need to completely rescind or repeal Section 501 of the IRS code, so that these NGOs simply cannot exist, because all they are is left-wing grifting operations fed by the federal government. And it's why we're seeing, for example, media platforms, left-wing media platforms like BuzzFeed and Media Matters and these media operations that also were set up as 501c3s and C4s, now going out of business all of a sudden because the USAID budget no longer exists. And so it's just really one of the most enormous grifts ever set up by anyone in our country. And, you know, this was all part of that general scheme. So anyway, it's over. Pete Buttigieg is no longer in office of any kind, although he's probably going to seek the presidency in 2028. And we'll see if the Democrats are willing to nominate him. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah, good luck.
You can't buy that kind of entertainment unless you
cannot.
go to the energy realities of davidblackman.substack.com.
Yeah, energy transition absurdities, blackman.substack.com. Oh, davidblackman.substack.com. And, you know, new content every day. Some of it's great. Some of it is not so good, but, you know, I'm inconsistent. What can I say? We try to have a good time.
Yeah. All right. Two really funny stories First, any bets on energy transition profits to match oil and gas by 2035. Do you know how they're going to do it? With two subsidiaries, which they call satellite companies. You know what
Right.
these companies do? One deals in biofuels, but also it deals with fuel retail, fuel as in diesel and petrol. And the other one deals in wind and solar
Wind and solar.
and electricity, but it also deals in gas distribution and electricity distribution. So what Eni did was, because it's business, and by the way, the FT is spelling this out. They're being truthful about it.
Oh my
So
gosh.
when Eni started doing wind and solar, and EV charging as well, it wasn't doing very well, this business. So they decided to combine it with some of their hydrocarbons business because it was making money. And now, after they combined it, these two are making money, and they even sold a couple of stakes in each of the two companies to one to KKR and the other, I forgot which private equity
Wow.
giant it was, for billions of dollars, because they are now making money. Why are they making money? Because of the hydrocarbons business, and they're
Right.
saying it. Claudio Descalzi is saying with a straight face that they're going to match the profits from their oil and gas business. It is your oil and gas business.
By
You
Wow.
2035.
It is still your oil and gas
Oh, my
business,
gosh.
but you combined it with wind and solar, so you can make it easier to pull out of them. It's really, really comical. It kind of felt like clapping at what Eni is doing. But
Yeah.
in the meantime, Eni just signed some 30-year deal for Algeria, I think. They're doing deals in Egypt. They are pursuing oil and gas.
Yeah.
I mean, the man, Descalzi, knows what he's doing. He's been in the oil and gas industry for many, many, many years.
Yeah.
But apparently he also knows how to spin it.
So have we had a true change in direction at the FT, telling the truth about these things all of a sudden after all these years of propaganda?
I wouldn't
That's
hope.
why the headline says betting on the transition profits.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they just say the
Pathetic.
truth in the
Yeah.
middle of the story, but hoping that nobody will notice, because it's the
Yeah.
wind, solar, and EV chargers that are driving the profits.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other one is even more hilarious. I love this. Qatar threatened to cut EU LNG supplies over sustainability law, letter shows. Now, first of all, the energy minister of Qatar said it openly in December last year.
Yeah.
If you're going to pursue this, I call it the brass eyes directive, because it's called CDDD, the corporate due diligence directive. And basically they want to make sure that all foreign companies over a certain size doing business in the European Union should make sure that their supply chains do not involve slave labor, environmental damage, human rights violation, and that all of these companies have a net zero plan in place.
Yeah.
Obviously, Qatar Energy is not interested in net zero plans. So in December, the gentleman said, if you're going to do this, we're not going to sell you LNG, because if you do not comply with this directive, they could fine you with some up to 5% of your global turnover.
Yeah.
Apparently, once was kind of enough, but not entirely, because what do you know? This year, the European Union rushed to amend this directive, simplifying its requirements and making it easier to report and do all the compliance stuff. But Qatar is still not happy, so they had to write a letter to the Belgian government for some reason in May to spell it out. No, we are still not going to sell you LNG if you pursue this directive. And the energy minister even included a sort of postscript saying, you have to remove the net zero plan requirement, or you're not getting any Qatari LNG.
Nice.
Wow.
That's huge. That is absolutely huge because if
Awesome, man.
they give up and give in to Qatar, and I think that they should, they're going to have to give in to the U.S.
Yeah.
And-
Exactly, which is going to wreak havoc on the argument for, oh, we're all for diversification. We do not want to be reliant on a single supplier. Really? You either get reliant on a single supplier, which is Trump's America, or you spit in your own face, as we say down here, and you remove a net zero plan requirement to keep getting Qatari LNG. It's really nice. It's fun.
I love
it's
this
expensive.
statement. I love the statement they made. And this is really true because the whole point of the Paris Agreement, which is not enforceable supposedly by international law or whatever, it's that every country has a right to set their own national contributions towards the Paris Agreement goals. But by forcing companies and countries to have, especially when it's a state energy company like in Qatar, it's basically forcing another country to have the same nationally determined contribution as the country that they're exporting to. And that's really an infringement upon national sovereignty. So I think Qatar's right to push this issue because the EU wants every country that trades with them to do this, to set this net zero transition plan, which is then, because it's in the financial statements, is now available for litigation. So environmental groups could sue the company for not having met its transition plan targets and can create all kinds of issues in international trade. So I think they're absolutely right to make that argument.
Wow.
And the
My
EU is
goodness.
absolutely insane to try and enforce this because they're not in a position of power. They're in the position of energy beggars.
Wow.
And they've imposed that position on themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, but now
Very
they're trying to
enthusiastic.
and trying to make everybody else be like them too.
Right.
Two fantastic stories, Irina. Great
Yeah.
job. Holy
Really,
smokes.
really funny. Yeah.
And your Substack is
And
phenomenal.
my Substack is Irina Slavon Energy. Yeah, I try to post regularly, whether you like it or not, dear readers.
I get my Irina fix when I listen to your stories. So I actually like the way you do it. So it's an outstanding Substack. This one we've already covered a little bit on. Wind and solar projects are waking up to the fact, but I want to go ahead and cover this one. U.S. green projects cancellation hit $22 billion in the first half of this year. And this is a very important point. David, you brought up some of this a little bit earlier in the fact that in Secretary Chris Wright's great report that we had about 2 weeks ago, we have about just ballpark 200 gigawatts of planned projects in the United States. 22 gigawatts of those are nuclear and natural gas. That's it. And we're about to have 100 gigawatts retire of coal and or natural gas plants retire as well. So we've got a gigantic, the mathin' ain't mathin' up, as we say in Texas.
No. Yeah.
It ain't mathin', and we got 100-fold blackouts coming out of this. But when you take a look at this, is very, very critical because as these projects, David, the folks that you just mentioned, you mentioned that there's about 100 gigawatts of wind and solar that aren't mathing up, as we say, right? Is that what they said from FTI Consulting?
Very conservative estimate. Yes.
Holy smokes, Batman. So you're going to see this number hit 100 billion canceling very quickly in this. So I think that is a huge issue. And then we've covered a lot on the EU reach historic agreement. That was some excellent trolling by President Trump. I find him very humorous, and I felt almost sorry for von der Leyen. She almost felt sorry for her, but
There is no reason to feel sorry for her.
That was a fleeting moment of like, holy smokes, that was some brutal activity that he was doing there. And I didn't play the part on the open border. He goes, everybody in the EU's got open borders. I don't have an open border. And I'm like, holy smokes, dude, that was brutal. But anyway, you can
Not
find
everybody. Some countries have protected their borders. I think Bulgaria may be one of them.
Hungary?
No?
We
Poland
do
has.
our
A little
best,
bit.
but we
Poland,
just
Poland.
not very attractive. But they're going to send their migrants to us now because the people are
Well, it'll be your strength, believe me. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can find me on energynewsbeat.co as well as the energynewsbeat.substack.com. And
Wonderful stuff, Stu.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks.
Amazing stuff.
This guy pounds out content like no one I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's unreal. I don't know how you do it.
I don't sleep much, and when I do, when I'm relaxing, I'm actually it's kind of fun. I did about a ton worth of cement work this weekend on this massive project I've got out here. But I think on the backhoe, or I think when I'm riding a bike, or I'm writing stories, and I get back, and it makes it a lot easier to write. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
That's
it helps.
right.
Yeah,
It does.
it does help.
No
Yeah,
doubt.
maybe that's why, when the founders wrote the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution, so many of them actually worked on the land and they had time to think about these things.
Yeah, it has
Something-
something.
I like that.
Yeah, it helps you think. It helps you think.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what are we
for
doing
sure.
this week? What's going to be new this week? We have all these slow news weeks. Nothing ever happens, and
Yeah.
it's hard to imagine what we'll even be talking about next week.
I don't know.
Uh-oh.
I mean,
I know. We try, Emil. We try, but we don't really have the manpower.
Hmm.
And I live actually along a route that is used by smugglers, refugee smugglers. Well, I'm not sure if they're even refugees. And the police regularly makes, how do you call it, when they set up posts along the road and stop cars that are suspicious. We do try, but
Well, that's more than the UK does. I mean, it's like they.
we don't
bring 'em all
welcome
in
them with
limousines.
open arms because they don't
Yeah.
want to stay here. The only people who want to stay in Bulgaria are the actual refugees running away from war, because
Yeah.
they are running away from war and they don't care if they're going to get massive help from the government. They just want to not be in a war zone,
Right.
which I respect, obviously, and understand. Most of them go west.
sadly, yeah, they all end up in the UK. And France helps them.
Germany, and
They help
Germany,
with
and France.
and Germany. And yeah.
No
I
matter
want to
what.
just, before we wrap up, I wanted to say one thing about the wind turbines wearing out after 8 years. I think that's really an American phenomenon, and that's related to the subsidies, because there's various wind projects in Canada that have been around for some time where the wind turbines are still going and stuff like that,
Right.
because the subsidy structure isn't the same as it is in the United States. And it's the same thing, I think, with the solar panels in America, where because the subsidies applied to new installations than
Yeah.
things that they had just recently installed. Oh no, we have these other ones that are better, and then they would take them down and to get the subsidy. So I think we have to be a little bit careful when talking about the wind turbines wearing out. I still think it's probably mostly an American thing. I don't think they do that in the UK. And I know they
It
don't
would
do
be
that in
curious. Excellent point, Tammy. I absolutely love your point. I had to pull teeth in order to get those numbers. And I
Yeah.
find it odd that President Trump said that in that meeting. So either he's reading my podcast, or somebody on his team is reading my material. And I applaud your statement, Tammy, 100%, that it may be an American phenomenon, but I'm guaranteeing you the numbers won't be published globally.
Yeah, I
They
agree.
hide those numbers. So I'm going to
Yeah.
put it as a 50% that it might be there.
Well, I
all
think it
due
depends.
bad incentives in our subsidy structure. And the good news is that's all going to be going away.
Yay. Yeah.
Yay.
And I think it also depends on the manufacturer and stuff, because Siemens Gamesa was running into trouble with some of their bigger turbines where they were wearing out much quicker, which is why their profits had dropped substantially, because they were stuck doing all these sort of maintenance things for the larger turbines. So again, it depends on the manufacturer, depends on the subsidy structure, how are companies trying to game the system. So yeah.
But they are trying to game the system.
And I just want to say I really appreciate all of you and all of our great listeners out there as well too. But you three cats are some pretty cool cats. So
Right back at you.
Thanks for the comments, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See y'all a week
See you
from
next week.
today, same
Bye-bye.
time.
Bye.